How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. 0.25 Bitcoin is the new 1 Bitcoin. It's the new whole coiner. I want to explain why I think that is and why this is important for you to pay attention to understand. If you don't mind, hit subscribe. Turn on the bell notification underneath the video so you can see future videos just like this one. Also, there is a link to Margex in case you want to trade cryptocurrencies. Sometimes you can get outsized returns by trading or by leveraging, so you can check that out. It's not right for everyone, but if you do want to try it out, there's a link underneath the video that gives you some extra bonuses. There's also a link down there to HGAalgo in case you want an indicator that helps you with your dollar cost averaging and your trading. Check that out. Seriously, it's a really good tool. Now, this is just going to be a laid back video, just you and me talking like we're grabbing a drink or grabbing coffee or something. No fancy charts or anything like that. Maybe I'll show you what's on my screen here, a little spreadsheet here. But right now, we're heading into a part of the market cycle that is quite explosive. There are people that will FOMO in. There are people that want to hit certain goals, right? After you see Bitcoin's price hitting all-time highs, which it's hitting all-time highs in a lot of different currencies across the world, not just like small countries with inflation problems. No, it's hitting all-time highs in Sweden and Norway and Japan. We're only 18% away or 20% away from the all-time high in the US. A lot of people don't understand that there's not a lot of time to be able to get allocated to a asset like this. Like you feel like there's all the time in the world when you're in the bear market. Maybe you start shorting Bitcoin or you just don't buy because you think it's going to go lower, and then it starts moving up and you have this disbelief phase and that keeps on moving up and you're like, okay, well, it's bound to come down at some point. It's moved up too fast. And this continues on until we're at $57,000 Bitcoin, right? Hopefully that's not you, but I know there are people out there that are doing this. And you get left on the sidelines. And a lot of people, after they start buying Bitcoin, they have some goal. It's kind of an arbitrary goal because really what you should be looking at is what kind of upside you have in the asset and then allocate accordingly due to the risk and to the upside. But a lot of people want a certain amount of Bitcoin. For the longest time, it was 1 Bitcoin. That's the goal, a whole coiner. Having a whole coin is a big deal in a lot of people's minds. Now, that wasn't always the case. Keep in mind, in 2015, Bitcoin was only $300. So I wasn't in Bitcoin at the time, but I can imagine most people probably weren't trying to just get one whole coin. Sure, that was great. Like maybe if you were a kid or someone that didn't have much capital, but like that's not much Bitcoin, right? $330 worth of Bitcoin. So a lot of people try to buy 10 Bitcoin or 100 Bitcoin. 100 Bitcoin makes a lot of sense. 30 grand worth of Bitcoin. That's a lot back then. 30 grand could buy a car or you could buy some Bitcoin with it, right? So 100 Bitcoin was the goal. Then 4 years later, we were in the next bear market. We had already gone up to like 20,000, then back down to 4,000. And I'm not cherry picking bottoms here. This is just about the price that was for months and months on end. $4,000 in 2019. You could buy about 10 Bitcoin for the same price that you could buy 100 Bitcoin for in the previous market cycle. So $4,000 per Bitcoin, you buy 10, you have 40 grand worth. You could buy a car or you could buy 10 Bitcoin. In the 2021-2022 cycle, we were around $30,000, $40,000 for a good part of the time in that cycle. Even when we were in the midpoint of the two peaks, we were around 33,000. Again, you could buy 1 Bitcoin for $30,000, or you could buy a car. Now, in 2022, the price of Bitcoin went down to about $16,000. You could buy Bitcoin, and it was achievable still. You could buy a full Bitcoin. You could buy, maybe you have $100,000 income between you and your significant other. You save 15% into Bitcoin. Well, there you have it. You have a full Bitcoin. And some people made a lot more. Some people don't make that much, right? Maybe you can invest $1,000 a year or $500 a year. You can't buy a full Bitcoin at that pace with where the price is right now. But now we're heading into an interesting point. Now a full Bitcoin's 55,000 and it's climbing. It's getting more expensive. So if you had started back in 2022, maybe you could buy a full Bitcoin. If you dollar cost averaged over time, you'd have to probably buy at like an average of 30,000 though. But now we're at 55,000. and we're heading into a bull market. Next year, it's probably going to be $150,000. Keep in mind, at $150,000, let's just make the math easy, $160,000 Bitcoin. For the same price as a car, let's say that $30,000 to $40,000 range, for $40,000, you can buy 0.25 Bitcoin. Oof, that you're not at 1 Bitcoin anymore. 0.25 is the new 1 Bitcoin because it's about the price of a car. Again, it's expensive for a lot of people. It's really hard to get to that level for a lot of people, but it's doable. Now, maybe in 2026 we fall down, right? We have a bear market. Maybe we have some kind of recession, or we just had the normal 4-year cycle. People take profits. Again, that would be 4 years after the 2022 bear market. So 2026, 2 years from now, maybe we fall back down to $60,000 per Bitcoin. We last cycle fell down slightly higher or slightly lower than the previous high. So in this next bear market, maybe we fall below that $69,000 mark. Maybe we fall to $55,000, $60,000. But that's still not very achievable for a lot of people to buy a full Bitcoin. Keep in mind, in the previous bear markets, you could have bought 10 Bitcoin for $40,000. You could have bought 1 Bitcoin for $16,000. Now we're going to say you're going to buy 1 Bitcoin at $60,000. Now, I don't think that's very achievable, even during the next bear market, because a lot of people don't want to allocate heavily to crypto during bear markets. Like, yeah, you do some dollar cost averaging, but it's really hard to allocate a lot and feel really good about because there's so much FUD out there. You saw Bitcoin at, let's say 2025, it hits $200,000, $300,000, and then it falls 80%. You're telling me you're going to go balls deep, sorry for that, but go really hard into Bitcoin when it's falling down? I don't know. A lot of people can't even afford to invest $60,000 into one asset. So it's going to be very hard to get to 1 Bitcoin. You're still probably going to be looking at maybe a quarter of a Bitcoin. So at $160,000, okay, you're buying, you're excited about it. You put in 40 grand, you get a quarter of a Bitcoin. During the bear market, maybe you keep on allocating, but you're a little bit scared, you're a little bit timid, so you put in $15,000, about the cost of 1 Bitcoin back in 2022. So you get a quarter of a Bitcoin. It just, every cycle it becomes harder. Whether you're in the bear market, whether you're in the bull market, every cycle it becomes harder. And your psychology always works against you too. Keep in mind too that a quarter of a Bitcoin is more than millionaires will be able to have. That's why, again, it's a kind of a psychological level. Whole coiner status is psychological. 10 Bitcoin was psychological. 100 Bitcoin was psychological. 0.25 Bitcoin is psychological because, again, it's kind of like a round number. It's not obviously a round number, but it's a round decimal. It's a important milestone, right? A fourth of a Bitcoin. Also, when you look at how many millionaires there are, 60 million millionaires in the world, which is probably outdated. It's probably more than that now, probably 80 or 100 million millionaires. But 60 million millionaires, maybe about 15 million Bitcoin left after you account for Satoshis and some Satoshis Bitcoin and some Bitcoin that's lost. Keep in mind, this doesn't even account for all the Bitcoin that's just being held long term, right? But that's a good goal, 0.25. That is the new wealthy individual, right? Whole coiner status is going to be very hard to achieve unless you're a millionaire probably already, or you're highly liquid and you're willing to take really large bets. You're not going to be able to hit whole coiner status if you're worth $200,000 and you have a significant other and Bitcoin's at $100,000, right? Like, the significant other probably is not going to feel very good about you being having half your net worth in Bitcoin. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I just want to start. How do I start? Do I go buy a full Bitcoin right now? Maybe I have $30,000. Maybe I want to put half a Bitcoin in, right? I would say start with 1% allocation. I've heard this recently from someone else. I think this is a good goal. Just start with 1% allocation because you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn what you don't know about Bitcoin. Start with 1% allocation. I don't care if you want to put in 5% or 10%. Start with 1% and then go from there. Right? Put in 1%, you can decide next week, next month if you want to put in more. But if you put in 5 or 10% right now, we could fall down 5 or 10%. Bitcoin's price could fall 5 or 10%. And then you get flushed out of your Bitcoin, you get freaked out. And then it messes with your psychology. Let's say right now we're at $57,000. You buy 10% of your portfolio. We fall down to $52,000, which really isn't that big a swing. And then you sell And then we go back up to $62,000 and you're like, well, now I have to wait because I could have been in at 57, but I sold at 52. Now it's at 62, so I'm just going to hold off. No, you want to be in this, but you want to make sure you're comfortable and you don't make stupid decisions. So start with 1% and slowly allocate in, right? Maybe it's a couple weeks, maybe it's a couple months, maybe it's a couple days. It depends on you. But I would start dollar cost averaging. If you haven't already done that, start to dollar cost average. If you don't have a large enough allocation. If you're sitting there with a fat bag of Bitcoin and some other altcoins, congrats, because you made it. These are the fun videos to make, right? 100 Bitcoin turned into 10 Bitcoin, turned into 1 Bitcoin, turned into 0.25 Bitcoin. During the next market cycle, it'll probably be 0.1 Bitcoin is difficult. And I've said before that 0.1 Bitcoin is a big milestone, and it is. Every single milestone is a big milestone. Every single 0.01 Bitcoin is a big 0.01 Bitcoin. But is it achievable for most people? 0.25 isn't even achievable for most people right now. But if you can get there, great. Next cycle, if you can get to 0.1 Bitcoin, it's going to be crazy because if we're at $500,000 Bitcoin, $50,000 is too much for most people to allocate towards one asset. So again, 0.1 Bitcoin is the new goal. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will see you in the next video. You can check out the links to MargeX and to HGAlgo. If you want to know what I'm buying and selling, there's a link down there to the Patreon as well. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.